Bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, nous allons parler du chapitre 6, Grammaire 2, La vie à la campagne. In this chapter, we have learned to talk about when we were a child, events in the past. We've learned comparing life in this country and city and describing the country. Today, specifically, we'll be looking at the comparative with adjectives and nouns. So what is the comparative? The comparative is expressions that are used with adjectives and nouns to compare people and things. Alex, what's an example of a comparison in English?
An apple and tomato.
What about them?
They're both fruits.
So how can you compare them as being different?
One makes ketchup, one makes juice.
Maybe an apple is sweeter than a tomato?
Yes, sweeter.
So are there any special rules for comparative? There are. We have to make the adjective agree with the noun and gender and number. So that's the masculine, feminine, singular, plural. There is an exception. Of course, there's always an exception with French. There is no agreement with say. So let's do a couple examples and it'll make more sense. So the comparative, you will generally see a series of 3 different types of statements. So plus plus an adjective plus que is more than. Aussi plus an adjective plus que is as blank as. And moins an adjective and que is less something than. So for example, could we say an apple is more sweet than a tomato? A watermelon is as juicy as an orange. So let's look at some examples in French. La ville est plus bruyante que la campagne. The town is more noisy than the countryside. So notice, la ville, ça c'est ça c'est féminin. Let's erase that. La ville, ça c'est féminin, est plus bruyante que la campagne. So since the ville is feminine, we have to add that E to make it agree. Another example. La ville est aussi intéressante que la campagne. Same deal. La ville est féminin, alors intéressant est féminin. Et enfin, la campagne est moins polluée que la ville. Polluée, ça c'est féminin aussi parce que c'est la campagne est féminin. La campagne est polluée avec un E. La ville, c'est aussi intéressant que la campagne. In this case, this is our exception since we used say. There is no adjective agreement. So even though we're talking about the ville, there's no adjective agreement here because we used say. So how do I compare nouns? You can compare nouns using plus de, moins de, and autant de. Remember, you have to use the que to continue the comparison. So for example, il y a plus de vaches que de canards. So what that translates to is there are more cows than ducks. So there are more of the cows than of the ducks. So your de basically means of. There are more of these than there are of these. Another example. Il y a moins de chevaux que ses grands-parents. There are less of the horses than her grandparents. So in this case, she has less of them than they do. Alright, that should pretty much do it for comparative. I know it's a little tricky. Watch it again, get your notes down, and we will discuss it further at the beginning of next class. Alors, bonne nuit tout le monde.